بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق وخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره ومقداره العظيم. اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا من فضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. الحمد لله وشكر الله. As to cast a backward glance for an instant, we've mentioned some of the things that are asbab, or causes or means of fitness for suluk in the general context, which is إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. To see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the outward forms of the causes and effects as the one who is doing and choosing all of the things that those who are veiled ascribe to these causes and effects. Al-Hasan Shadhili radiallahu ta'ala anhu, what did he say? He said, Man ahabba Allah, he said, whoever loves Allah, wa ahabba lillah, and loves for the sake of Allah. And this is the point here. We choose to take or to leave things for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for our love of Allah. فَقَدْ تَمَّتْ وِلَايَتُهُ بِالْحُبِّ. His wilaya has been perfected through love. And he talked about a little bit about what he meant in another expression. He said, إِذَا حَبَّ اللَّهُ عَبْدًا وَإِذَا أَكْرَمَ اللَّهُ عَبْدًا فِي حَرَكَاتِهِ وَسَكَنَاتِهِ. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honors a servant in his states of motion and states of rest, نَصَبَ الْعُبُودِيَّةَ بَيْنَ عَيْنَيْهِ. He raises up the servant's own slavehood to Allah before his very eyes. وَسَتَرَ عَنْهُ الْحُدُودِ. And he conceals from him his own selfish purposes. وَجَعَلَهُ يَتَقَلَّبُ فِي عُبُودِيَّةِ اللَّهِ. And he makes him, in all of his phases and stages and transformations during the day and the night, turn about in the slavehood, in the servanthood of Allah Most High. وَالْحُدُودِ أَنْهُ مَسْتُورًا كَأَنَّهُ عَنْهَا بِمَعْزَلٍ أو كَأَنَّهُ بِمَعْزَلٍ عَنْهَا, he said. And it's as though his selfish purposes are occluded from him, or veiled from him, and he's at a remove from them. وَإِذَا أَهَانَ اللَّهُ عَبْدًا فِي حَرَكَاتِهِ وَسَكَنَاتِهِ. And when Allah humiliates a servant in his motions and in his rests, his non-motions, نَصَبَ الْحُدُودِ بَيْنَ عَيْنَيْهِ. He puts up his own selfish purposes right before his very eyes, in all of the daylight hours and all of the night hours when he's not asleep. وَسَتْرُ الْعُبُودِيَّةَ عَنْهُ. And he veils slavehood to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from this person. فَهُوَ يَتَقَلَّبُ فِي حُدُودِهِ. And so he turns, in his transformations, he turns over and over as to which of his selfish ends may be served. عُبُودِيَّةُ اللَّهِ. مَسْتُورٌ عَنْهُ أو عَنْهُ بِمَعْزَلٍ. And the slavehood of Allah Most High is at a remove from him. وَإِنْ يَجْرِي عَلَيْهِ شَيْءٌ مِنْهَا فِي الظَّاهِرِ. Even if something seems to transpire upon him outwardly of it, of his slavehood. And so fitness, what we mean by fitness as Sufis and of people who are trying to reach marifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and act and live our marifa, means that fitness is that by which one fits one's purpose. The Prophet ﷺ, what did he say? He said, لأن أقول سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر أحب إلي مما طلعت عليه الشمس. He says, for me to say Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Baqiyat Salihat, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar. To say these words is more beloved to me than everything upon which the sun rises. Well, what about the gross national product? You're talking about billions. You talk about this. The Prophet clearly made plain to us in this hadith that actions are primary, are worth infinitely more than things. Actions are worth infinitely more than things. All of it all together, all of the gold, all of the national budgets, all of the euros, all wrapped up and put in a package. Doesn't the Prophet ﷺ like to say these four things more? It tells you something. He doesn't speak from his own opinion, but it's only inspiration, inspired unto him. And so we understand that the purpose, your purpose, which is actions, immortal, good deeds, are more important than any things in this world. So we approach the question of fitness with the same point of view. This is the Sufi who is, if you understand what this hadith means, some of the murids actually expressed to me their adulation for Job, trillionaire. You know, he's a humble man and he lives in a little house and he has trillions. Quack, quack. What a ridiculous point of view for someone who's a murid in the tariq-illah. You have to know that actions are what lives forever, and things, you're going to kiss them all goodbye with your last breath. You won't be coming back to them, nor are they coming back to you. Complete. Close out clearance. And so this is the spirit in which we appreciate health and fitness also. It's nothing in itself, but rather it's a means. But as it turns out, it's a means that the prophetic sunnah affirms and confirms. So there's a tarjih of af'al in the revelation that was revealed to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Deeds are more important than anything. The deeds of the heart more important than the deeds of the limbs. And of them is marifa, the total iman. And so we said there are various factors to Sufism is wisdom, and wisdom is that which enables one to live a good life. A good life is that which lasts forever in perfect comfort. And we mentioned a couple things that are important, very important in fitness. In good health, to keep our life within our body, the most important of things is deep peace in the heart that comes from being with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is what the Sahaba had, and this is what the Sufis had, and this is why they lived to such incredible, years. And we also mentioned that fitness includes, fitness means fit to one's purpose, fitted to one's purpose, which is to attain the good pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So deep peace in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the most important thing about for fitness. Second, having a point and the means to effect and bring about the realization of that point. What point? Your point. What's the point of you anyway? Our point is Allah. And so the approach to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the greatest point of fitness. It's the greatest thing. Somebody without a point has no inspiration. There's nothing, they're all dressed up and no place to go. And the third thing we mentioned is suhbah. Suhbah of Allah, suhbah of Rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the suhbah of the salihin and awliya, and the suhbah of the mu'mineen. A person is strong through their group. This is plain. This is why we mentioned in the Canadian suhbah last time or the time before about the people who are cut off from each other. People cut themselves off from each other by digital technology. There's an article in The Scientist, in an publication from England, that was entitled "Well Connected?" and it showed how people were dissevered. People messaging each other from across the cafeteria instead of real, relationships with living flesh and blood people, always beeping and clicking at each other. So this is, and people as a result are their fitness is less for their purpose. They're weaker. So they don't have anybody. And we mentioned food, and we'll mention a couple more things about food and water, and the fuel for the body to do things, and exercise, and that is important. And finally, the recovery from exercise, recovery from one's fatigues. And the aynaka alayka haqqan, verily your eye has a right over you. It's always nodding out whenever you get a quiet moment and you're not giving your recovery and its due. So we mentioned a couple of things. The old English proverb, for age and want, poverty. Save while you may, for no morning sun lasts a whole day. And so basically the way that you live your life in body and in spirit and in mind is the way that it tells when you get up there in years. The arteries are clogged and choked with grease, because that's what you're with problems, hardening and so forth, because of the things that a person ate and so forth. And also the person who has the same muscle mass that they had when they were 30 have the same muscle mass when they're 70 years old. There's a person that will have approximately, other things being equal, the same amount of sickness or wellness as they had. Surprisingly. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu kulu min tayyibati ma razaqnakum. O you who believe, eat of the fair viands, the fair foods, the excellent foods that we have faithfully provided you day after day after day. Washkuru lillahi in kuntum iyyahu ta'budun. And thank Allah if it is Him, if it be Him that you worship. So our problem is how to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is our purpose. The purpose of man is how to thank Allah. And as Murta'ish said, radiallahu anhu, he said, Afdal al-a'mal, he says the best of works is to correct one's slavehood to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to improve it and complete it and perfect it. Tasheeh al-ubudiyyati al-mushahada, through beholding the divine. Because when, the realization of the divine takes place, then everything is seen in its proper perspective. Things are but a means that are from Allah and unto Allah, for the heart that is aiming at what it should aim at. وَمُلَازِمَةُ الْخِدْمَةِ عَلَى السُنَّةِ, and being steadfast in serving the deen, oneself and one's Lord, according to the sunnah. Nasallallahu tawfiq wa taysir. So we wanted to mention a couple of things. We mentioned some things about fitness. We'll return to some of the food angles, inshallah, if we have a moment after. One of the things under the general topic of exercise, we didn't talk too much about exercise. The exercise that's preferable is something that's variegated, that you can do, and from different quarters, there's different kinds of exercise. I think the person could certainly do worse than combining various schools of thought in exercise, such as weights and walking and jogging. Weights work out muscle groups, and jogging and walking work out the heart, basically, and the legs. They pull the body together somewhat, but it's basically the heart and lungs. So don't put all your eggs in one basket. Also, spinal flexibility has a great deal to do with how well one is in one's old age. This is a certain thing. And so, what does it mean? It means that if you can find someone to teach one Tai Chi Chuan or something like this, it's a tremendous advantage. These forms of exercise are also good. And calisthenics. Some of the best exercises are ones that can be done in just a few square meters of room, in a hotel room, for example, just to get everything moving. Of the banes of modern life are one of the biggest, the most dangerous thing in the house, practically, is the chair. People who sit for 4 hours in a row, the body gives all the wrong signals with its insulin and with its hormonal control and other things. So you have to get up and stir around. Every 45 minutes or so, you should get up and stir around the house, do something. Go over and hug your wife, and then come back and sit down. Do something useful, you know. And so this is one thing that, find a way to change your sitting into standing, or you're doing some meaningless computer work. If you ride a bicycle while you're doing it, a stationary bicycle or something, or stand up when you read. Instead of sitting down, find a little podium or something and stand up in front of it. Another of the banes of modern life, B-A-N-E-S, if anyone hasn't heard it, means the things that cause death. If anyone hasn't heard it. But is cell phones or something. They're better than they were in the old days, the first early cell phones. You hold your cell phone up to the car radio and you heard a big rash of static from it. And so they're a little bit less, but they're continually, whenever you have a cell phone with you, the relay station is continually triangulating its position so that you can be in continuous service. And when you're holding your cell phone up next to your head, I saw a person on the street and he was smoking a cigarette with one hand, he had his cell phone up to his ear with his other, and I said, which of those two hands is stupider? I didn't know. And there's an aperture named the hole that the hearing apparatus goes through, and you're sticking something that's radiating energy this close to your brain. It's not. So a person should, and sometimes, like when you're traveling, you'll need it. You can't. There's virtually nothing else you can do. But as for the fun and amusement on your good old trusty cell phone, where are you? Why? Nothing. Could be spending the time in dhikr Allah. This is of the hudud, when it's just for fun. This is of the selfish purposes of which that Allah humiliates the person who engages in that stuff all of the time. Alhamdulillah, I don't tend to use a cell phone. I may stick a cell phone up to my head maybe twice a month, and it's somebody else's cell phone. I use a landline. And it works for the purpose for the most of the time. Every time I hold the cell phone up to my head, I feel uncomfortable, like I do when I walk into a hospital, where they have these iatrogenic diseases in the hospital. Hospitals are places where people catch diseases. And cell phones also are of the same ilk. The less is more of them. And so if you can, ditch the cell phone and use something else instead. People got along just fine without them before, and they can still get along. When you're traveling, it's useful to have a cell phone, but again, it's not very easy to find a pay phone even in many of the airports anymore, because everybody's got their cell phone. Another of the difficulties are the things that one should try to free oneself. So get a landline is what I recommend, and use it more than you use your cell phone. Cell phones should only be used for emergency stuff. So they're unsafe technology. Another of the things is industrial scents. Probably all know these things better than I do, but things that is bright fluorescent green and that smells like some candy to eat is not something that you should wash your dishes with. One of the things that is frequently used in almost everything is muscone, which is like actual musk, but with a few molecular changes. It's cancer-causing. People using all this stuff in themselves, that everything smells, has these strong industrial perfumes, perfuming everything. These are, almost all of them have something to do with ill health, and many of them have a great deal to do with cancer. And alternatives exist, soap that isn't scented within an inch of your life, and so forth. So these industrial scents are something else. That car fresheners, if you're in somebody's car with a little freshener and get dizzy from it, take it down and stick it in the glove box for the duration of the trip. Who needs it? Another of the things, and it's not that serious, it doesn't compare to the detriment of leaving such things, but are the pesticides that they power blast the fruits and vegetables with. And maybe I'm not rich enough to buy organic, or I live in a country where they simply don't have anything that's organic, or it's harder than pulling teeth to get something that's organic. Like here, for example, well, what do? The best thing to do is take some dishwashing soap, 3 or 4 drops, and put it in a liter of water. Stick the vegetable in it, and whatever it is, and shake it around for 10 seconds. You've diminished 80% of the pesticide on that vegetable. It's something that, and the rest of it, inshallah ta'ala, Shaykh Abdul Rahman used to say before he ate, Bismillahi Shafi, in the name of Allah who cures ailments. And so the detriment of not eating, the detriment of eating sprayed vegetables without even washing them or doing anything about them is far less than the detriment of not eating vegetables. Vegetables are your friends, as it were, and healthy. There's many vegetables should be eaten, and the other things they're key to good health. This should be the foundation, and So wash vegetables and fruits. And then we mentioned the things that cause most of the diseases, like cancer and heart disease and dementia and Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's and all of these conditions, tumors of all sorts. And what are they? Chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, and advanced glycosylation end products. And one might care and should cast a glance at what Dr. Andrew Weil, what other people call simply decent eating habits, and what he calls the anti-inflammatory diet. It's in a chapter appendix in the back of his book, Healthy Aging, that he put out a year or two ago, I think. And so advanced glycosylation end products, or glycosylation end products, or glyconated end products, according to some people's usage of a different word, is caused, as we mentioned, by combining sugar and animal proteins in one and the same meal. If you have your treats, your sweets, have it at a different meal than the one that you have your meats and things that have animal protein in it. And we mentioned the worst of all worlds is ice cream, which contains sugar and the proteins that form these. And another of the banes of modern life is bad posture. This has a great effect on the health of a person. Circulation, the way that the organs work, it has a lot to do with, especially respiratory complaints. and people don't pay any attention to it, and it's something that you should work out. And another of the banes of modern life is lack of recovery, and meaning lack of sleep. And there should be, if you exercise, there should be one day off a week when you don't really exercise anything that really takes a lot of energy, at least one day of recovery so you can catch your breath. And the night is also a time of rest. I used to work out twice heavily in the morning and the evening, and I found I had a lot more strength when I quit working out in the evening. So it's a bit better to work out in the morning, and well, it depends. One can work out at both, but you do need recovery. Moreover, it's heavy exercise at night cranks one up, and so that one can't get to sleep. Whereas if you let things kind of taper off, and also don't bring your work home. They work you hard enough during the day, don't let them work you during the night as well. Somebody typing their last emails when they're sitting on their bed at 11 o'clock at night, this person's a wage slave. Just give it a miss. Know when to quit with this stuff. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made night and day with a wisdom. Allah has made the night, as He terms it in the Quran, a second, and a repose and a rest. And this is the natural cycle. It's one of the, we mentioned in the Sea Without Shore, one of the people he called light. He says light is a drug. In other words, you can screw up your pituitary and your hormonal governance systems within the body by, I'll pull an all-nighter. So the verb that's used by people who say that is instructive. It's like, I'll pull a fast one, or I'll pull a caper, or I'll pull a bank job. You're trying to pull one on your body, and it's just punishing yourself. As we mentioned before, the body's defenses, the neutrophils and the killer T cells and the other mechanisms by which the body gets rid of invading microbes and viruses, that diminishes by a third when one skips a night of sleep. Goes down to 60. But then what do you get when you get a 66 on your score in school? You get a flunk. And so often you flunk because here I go. And so these are some of the things that are within easy reach that we can get out of our lives and do something about. And then we wanted to mention a couple of things about memory. And this is something that people, if you teach somebody, then you have to have a memory. Otherwise, if you're always forgetting, you can't remember what you're supposed to be teaching. And so we wanted to mention a few of the things that we found useful. If you've got a Swiss cheese memory, you're out of it. You notice, and you're starting to get worried because you find things that are missing that are supposed to be there. You're trying to figure out if it happened 3 or 4 minutes ago. Then one of the reasonable books, it has some things that are wrong. It was published in 1999, I think, or something like that, or 1998 or something. I believe I found it in Singapore. It was called Brain Longevity. And it has too much reliance on supplements, but some of the advice is good in it, and it's a reasonable book to get the memory working again. And but some of the important things that it doesn't mention, and it might otherwise, is of the things that are from the Sunnah that help the memory, is memorizing the Quran. Ikrimah, who is the student of Ibn Abbas, who is the student of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Man qara al-Quran la yurad ila ard al-umr." Said, whoever recites the Quran, he said, will not be reduced to a pitiable old age, i.e. Alzheimer's, and he's out of it and unable to take care of himself. And this is what one of the doctors said to me. He said, he says, I've been going to the mosque. He said, I've never seen anybody who goes to the mosque regularly that got Alzheimer's. He said. And so these are some of the things that are important for cognitive functioning, to keep the brain working. One thing that helps, one thing that hurts, that I've personally noticed, I'm a keen observer of my own mind, my memory, because I have to use it. And one of the things that I found that pounds the memory is the same thing that pounds people that have incipient cases of arthritis, namely these cheap vegetable oils. People that serve up meals that are drenched with corn oil, fried foods that are fried 6 ways from Sunday, and all of this vegetable grease. Somebody who's a bit arthritic eats one of these meals. Oh boy, it's something tasty. They ache when they come home. And similarly, what I've noticed is that these cheap oils grease up the brain, and so that the memory doesn't work either. So there are good fats and there are bad fats. The good fats are the omega-3. And the trouble with the fats is the omega. There's another thing I wanted to mention is the omega-3, omega-6 ratio. We've alluded to it before. And in this respect, it's something that I believe that if anybody who wants to know their health and their fitness should get the test for it. It's a semi-expensive test because the doctors don't prescribe it, although they should. And the problem is basically that all of the animals that we eat the meat of, the land animals, are grain-fed animals these days. And the grains have oil in them. The wheat and the corn and all of this stuff that they feed the animals. And so the meat is now greased out with cheap oils. And so these are omega-6 oils, and these are opposed to the oils that are good for you, both are needed. However, you need a balance. And some people believe that the balance in ancient man was 1 omega-3 to 2 omega-6, that proportion. Some teenagers today, their omega-6 ratio is 1 omega-3 to 15 omega-6. And it contravenes the way that people have been for 100,000 years. The body is way out of whack. Why? Because they're shoveling down chips and shoveling down cakes that come out of cake mixes and all of this modern food, all of this packaged stuff that's in the grocery store. It's all greased out with these cheap shortenings. And so that's one of the things that also hits the brain. And so we'll read something about it if we can get time, inshallah. So the omega-3, omega-6, one should get it tested and see what it is. There's some outfits that do this. There's in Canada and in the United States and so forth. And so you just, they give you a little thing that whacks your finger, and you put a drop of blood on a little piece of paper and fold it up and send it to them. And they send you back the results in the mail, so it's not too tough. You might have a tough time finding a lab that does it, even in a major hospital. It's not a real common thing, but it should be. And it has a lot to do with this, all of these things that we mentioned, with chronic inflammation especially. It has a lot of things to do with it, and so it should be within reasonable bounds. Another thing, so omega-3 is, okay, how do you get the omega-3s up there then? The easiest thing is to get some cod liver oil, the lemon-flavored cod liver oil that we mentioned previously, and take about 3 teaspoons of it or something like that and work up to it. Sallallahu tawfiq. And cool down the vegetable shortenings and these sorts of things, because each of them compete for the same metabolic processes. And on the other hand, the villain of the previous scenario, the curtain is falling on it happily, namely saturated fat. I'm talking about butterfat and these kinds of fats. I found that they're good for the brain and that they help the memory, and that in fact these are precursors for, as we mentioned before, acetylcholine, the basic chemical messenger of the brain, and that they don't hurt, and that they don't affect the ratio that much. The body can handle them. I personally eat a bit more than I would probably recommend for other people, probably around closer to between 40 to 60 to occasionally 80 grams of saturated fat daily from my couple of kilos of sheep yogurt or whatever it may be. And the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio is very normal. They're very it's very acceptable, I can say. Okay, and so this is the wrong kinds of fats. In other words, vegetable juice 3 times a week. This is extremely the fresh made vegetable juice. The vegetables, cooked vegetables otherwise, but the fresh vegetable juice, and it should be drunk immediately because most of the juicers, the enzymes that are there are not there after even a few minutes. So you make it and then drink it. That's one of the best things. And other things, if the person is, what is recommended in this brain longevity book is phosphatidylserine. And it's a reasonable supplement. It's made from soy. You get the one that's made from soy. They had some made from animal sources, but they kind of ran out of class when the mad cow disease came around because they're made from the brains of animals. So you don't want that. You want soy. That's why I want phosphatidylserine. It's a memory aid, and it works. But unfortunately, the capsules and pills of it are expensive. You can get it in bulk and just use the right amount we'll mix it in with something else and eat it. It's not too expensive. And similarly, phosphatidylcholine is also a reasonable supplement to help brain function. And this is found in lecithin, which is found in eggs and other foods. But it can also be taken. And we mentioned butterfat. This is also zinc, as we mentioned before. This is needed for brain function and helps. And one of the most important things with the brain is exercising. It's unsurprising because everything's use it or lose it. And so memorizing and tathbit al-ilm, as they say in the Islamic circles, fixing one's knowledge, fixating it or making it firm and fast, fixing it in place, in other words, by reviewing what one has memorized. And so you should have an active intellectual life, not where you go from blog to blog or link to link, but that's a flabby, couch potato life, but where you memorize things from Allah and memorize things from the Prophet of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the hadith, 40 hadith and so forth, and find a way to review them. Put them on little cards or something and review them, even if you know them, and you can go through your things that you've memorized, or your surahs, have an order that you go through the surahs that you've memorized during the month, first day, second day, third day. So you do about 20 minutes or 30 minutes of memory work daily. This is what you need to have a good, clean memory that works. And even if the people distinguish between the long-term memory and short-term memory and the middle-term memory, the reviewing one's long-term memory things helps all of it. And learning new things helps all three. And so you become, the brain becomes keen, and it is able to remember things just hearing them once. Another of the things that helps the memory is not using the computer. The more that you use the computer, the worse your memory will be. And Allah knows the reason for this, but this is my experience and the experience of a number of people. The experience of a number of people who I've seen who were enthusiastic, small screen viewers, and their memory has got worse and worse and worse, and so did their common sense and their resourcefulness, even the ability to think their way out of something or make something into something else. The mind becomes flabby by sitting in front, by doing computer work. The reason for this, my first guess, could be something in radiation from the computer, but the more likely explanation, as far as I am concerned, is that it just saves too many steps. And so it's like labor-saving devices. Somebody who has a little beeper that does everything in the house, and so he just sits on the couch all the time, is analogous to somebody who never has to do any arithmetic, never has to think of any problems. Think anything in the first thing, second thing, fourth thing, and what the other things that should come between it. It doesn't have to use the brain, and this is what the computer overuse does. There are some people that don't know how to do anything in life except shop on the computer, or do other tasks, or go to work and work on the computer. And these people, the memory will be the worst. And so you have to have an active life, an active intellectual life, that you have memorization, that you have Quran recital, switch from your English to your Arabic to your English to your Arabic, with the Quran, with the Hadith, and so forth. This is an active intellectual life, and a rewarding one, and a good religious life. And all of these things help, and this makes the brain fit. It's like somebody who's, his only exercise is doing curls with an iron bar. His fitness will be far less than somebody who's running through a forest and dodging trees and jumping over logs and so forth, where his whole body is having to function and having to work and pull out the facts. And so reading, and also reading things from different periods of time, and reading literature, 15 minutes a day, it doesn't hurt, and so forth, and a variegated intellectual life. Also social contacts. You have an active social life with different people, and you have a group, and so forth. And singing also, various activities, not a one-dimensional thing. And the Quran at the forefront, trying to understand the Quran. The Quran has infinite depth and richness of expression, supreme succinctness of expression. And so it's the best things that one can do, is reading the Quran with tadabbur. Tadabbur comes from following out the final ends of something. It means to find the implications to their utmost end of the ayahs and how they relate to each other and why this ayah is in this place. And so the tafsir in the Quran and the sciences of Arabic, this is of a healthy intellectual life. And it's the one that is supremely challenging also. Also the islah, the correcting of one's salat. We've emphasized this before. Don't just go, assalamu alaikum, assalamu alaikum, but rather to focus on what one is saying during the salat, to speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is, in addition to the adab, the adab of the sharia, it's also something that helps as a part of one's contact is your contact with Allah Himself. And the salat is a sila, it's a conjuncture between your heart and between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so get it going, and so that it's an interactive salat, and so that you're actually, something is happening here and here with your salat. And so this is in your thoughts and in your heart and in your emotions altogether. All of these help. Praying in the mosque, as we mentioned before. And another of the things is a healthy physiology. We mentioned how to break addictions before, with sugar addictions or whatever, as we mentioned at the end of we read from the end of the article. Somebody who is physical exercise, it causes more brain cells to come into being in the frontal part of the head that contains the executive function, and so that the person who is well, who exercises well, is able to say no, has more control over what he wants to do with himself than people who do not exercise. And so it simply increases. So exercise increases the brain, other things being equal, if you're not taking steps backward with the other things. And muscle mass in the body, as opposed to fat, helps the brain. Muscles, they are extremely useful. They spend on the health in every part of the body. And so to have some people say that you should have at least 10% fat. Some people say less than this. And the vascular health, meaning their veins and arteries work. And they don't have every extra pound of fat is another 300 miles of capillaries that your heart has to pump the blood through. And so that has a lot to do with your health. And so lean, not necessarily mean, is better, better for the brain also, and better for the memory. So these are some of the things that we found to be useful. And the dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when one is sitting up between the two sajdas, of the salat. It's related in the Sunan al-Bayhaqi from the Prophet ﷺ that he used to say, Rabbi ighfir li warhamni wa'afini wajburni warfa'ni warzuqni wahdini. The dua that he made when he was sitting up between the two sajdas of the prayer. O Allah, forgive me and have mercy on me, and give me well-being, and fix me up, and make me straight and right, correct, body and mind, meaning, and raise me up, and bestow graciously with my provide for me, in other words, and guide me. And so this is something that one can say in one's between the sujood in one's salat. And the most, as we meant, the most important things in general thing is that Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in, the 5th verse of the Quran. And to also that everything that you do, the intention, if the intention is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it will be mubarak. And if it is for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it will be only half-baked. But it is possible that Allah can inspire you with a good intention later. Okay, so we wanted to, inshallah, I'm thinking, I'd like to have some sort of secular or a non-religious book that to recommend to people to read during Ramadan, and I've been seriously considering, the book Good Calories, Bad Calories by Gary Taubes, but I'm not sure. To summarize the most amazing and the most salient conclusions that he came up with that we mentioned last time. Dietary fat, well saturated or not, is not the cause of obesity, heart disease, or any other chronic disease of civilization. 2, the problem is the carbohydrates in the diet, i.e. flour and sugar, and refined carbohydrates, these starches and sugars especially. This is the problem in the diet. Their effect on insulin secretion. Insulin and sugar balance, the hormonal control of the body by the body, has a great deal to do with it. And thus the hormonal regulation of homeostasis, the body's own ability to manage itself. Like when it gets hot, what does the body do? It cools you down so it can survive. When it gets cold, what does the body do? It warms you up, and so forth. And it adjusts for salinity, how much salt is in the body. It adjusts when you're fasting. The entire harmonic ensemble of the human body, how the harmony is, the carbohydrates in the diet affect it all. The more easily digestible and refined the carbohydrates, like sugar and like flour, we mentioned why, because they're ground fine, they get into the bloodstream and spike the blood sugar quickly, more so than dates, for example. Dates stay in a clump in your stomach for a while, and they release their stuff slowly. The greater the effect on our health, weight, and well-being. 3, sugars, sucrose and high fructose corn syrup specifically, are particularly harmful because the combination of fructose and glucose simultaneously elevates insulin levels while overloading the liver with carbohydrates. And 4, and last, through their direct effects on insulin and blood sugar, refined carbohydrates, sugars and starches are the dietary cause of coronary heart disease and diabetes. They are the most likely dietary causes of cancer, Alzheimer's disease, and other chronic diseases of civilization. You can read the science in his book if you wish. So, Nas'alullah tawfiq wa taysir. I forgot to mention one of the two of the sunnahs that I should have mentioned about that help with memory and that help with the general well-being. One of these is to take a nap you must be kidding, at noon, or noonish, between noon and asr. Even if it's only for 5 or 10 minutes, get into so you can lay down. And it pairs 3 or 4, or even 10 minutes, 20 minutes of sleep at that time could pair an hour off your sleep needs in the night. Otherwise, the best time I found for sleeping, the very most valuable of all sleep, is the first period of the night. When you go to sleep at night, when it's dark and you go to bed, and if you can maximize that, and so we have tahajjud to get up for. So in summer months, in a latitude like this one, it'll normally mean splitting your sleep schedule a little bit before, something before Fajr and something after Fajr. And so this is also, but another period of time, a qaylula, as it's called in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, something that was done by the Prophet ﷺ and that the Sunnah recommends. And the body secretes human growth hormone, I believe it is, and the time that one is asleep during the day. And it's something that is very valuable to the body, HGH. And it doesn't happen when one is awake. And alhamdulillah wa shukrillah, nasallallahu tawfiq wa taysir. We mentioned the value of eating foods that have especially vegetables that fill one up and that they're mostly water in their composition. These are some of the best things. The carrots, broccoli, each of these contain hundreds and hundreds of phytochemicals that actively fight cancer and other things, substances that they don't even have names for. Many of the substances, they're extremely valuable, especially in the ensemble, in the way that Allah has assembled them in these vegetables. So whole vegetables and cooked, steamed, just enough to get so that they're cooked for you are excellent. A steamer with a basket in the bottom of it. You can cook vegetables that can fill you up completely in 12 minutes. It's less time than it takes to do a hamburger. And so they're a valuable thing that one can use. And fruits also, but less valuable than vegetables. Fruit juices are not particularly valuable. They're just calories, and there isn't a lot of value in them for the most part. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت سيدنا محمدا وسيلته وفضيلته وبعث مقام محمود الذي وعدته وصلي وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد والحمد لله رب العالمين. I didn't mention of the supplements brain supplements that I didn't mention. There are some extremely valuable ones. 3 things that come to mind. One of them is turmeric, curcumin, that which gives curry its characteristic yellow tint. It's found to obviate in vitro, in test tube tests, the formation of Alzheimer's plaques in genetically predisposed mice and so forth. So turmeric, and just as an anecdotal thing, in southern India, where some of the best turmeric is found, and they use it also in their cuisine, they have something like less than a fifth of the rates of Alzheimer's of the rest of the world. And it may well have something to do with turmeric. Turmeric is not absorbed by the body very well. One thing that increases its absorption is black seed, habbat baraka. Increases the absorption quite a bit. So, for example, 2 teaspoons of turmeric and 1 teaspoon of black seed. And also, one thing that really potentiates the turmeric and gets it where it's supposed to go is ground black pepper, about maybe 1/4 teaspoon. So you can heavily pepper your food, you can get it going, but it increases the absorption of turmeric about 2,000 times. Just a bit of black pepper, and there's an alkaloid or something in it, pepperine, or pepperin, also pronounced. So nasrullah tawfiq wa taysir. And finally, I'll just read a final thing about to underline what we've previously mentioned about good fats and bad carbohydrates. It says under the title, "Sugar makes you stupid, but omega-3s will smarten you back up." It says, though we may have not fully come to terms with it, in theory we know that high fructose corn syrup is an adversary of health. And it's in everything. They took out the saturated fat, the butter out of everything, and the animal fat, and they put in fructose in its place in American grocery store shelves. Lots of work has been done on looking at the effect of fructose on weight, liver function, diabetes risk, and even the growth of cancer cells. But not much has looked at the role of fructose in brain function until now. Researchers have just reported that among the list of bodily ills that fructose contributes to, it may also, quote, make you dumb. Luckily, eating a rich diet, a diet rich in healthy omega-3 fatty acids, cod liver oil, salmon, sardines, herring, mackerel, sablefish, or black cod, these sorts of greasy, heavy, oily, cold water ocean fish. Or if you don't like them, then lemon-flavored cod liver oil or salmon, sockeye salmon oil, whatever, seem to counteract this phenomenon. In a new study, UCLA researchers had rats that spent a few days learning to navigate a maze. Then some of the rats ate diets rich in omega-3 fatty acids or deficient in them, and some rats also drank a fructose solution in place of the regular drinking water. After 6 weeks on their respective diets, the team put the rats back in the maze to see how well they recalled it. Rats who had eaten the omega-3 deficient diets were slower at completing the maze than the ones who ate diets rich in omega-3s. Those who drank the fructose solution instead of water were the worst off of all when it came to their cognitive capabilities. They also had important differences in how their bodies and brains were metabolizing sugar and functioning overall. Rats who had eaten diets without omega-3s had higher triglyceride levels, either fats in the blood that are prejudicial to health, as well as higher glucose and insulin levels. In fact, the rats seemed to enter a state of insulin resistance, the precursor to diabetes, but this too was reversed by the addition of omega-3s. This cod liver oil is very valuable. Perhaps the most interesting was the fact that the brains of rats without the omega-3s showed a decrease in synaptic activity, the brain cells' communication with each other, the means by which the brain cells talk to one another, and which is critical in learning and memory. The DHA, i.e. that's something that is in the fish oil that people eat, deprived animals were slower, says the study author, Fernando Gomez Pinella, and their brains showed a decline in synaptic activity. Their brain cells had trouble signaling each other, disrupting the rat's ability to think clearly and recall the route that they had learned 6 weeks earlier. Insulin influences not only blood sugar, but also affects the ways in which brain cells function. So being in a state of insulin resistance might be what's behind the problems in brain function. The author of the study suggests that fructose might somehow block insulin's effect on brain cells, and specifically how it signals neurons to store and release the sugar that is needed for the brain to function efficiently and for us to think crisply and clearly. The study also points to the fact that metabolic syndrome, which is plaguing so many Americans these days, they feel tired despite the fact of having eaten because they can't uptake the energy, the precursor to diabetes, can also adversely affect our cognitive abilities, our ability to think. The important thing to remember is not all fructose is created equal. We're not talking about naturally occurring fructose in fruits, which also contain important antioxidants. We're more concerned about the fructose in high fructose corn syrup, which is added to manufactured food products as a sweetener and preservative. Luckily, omega-3s seem to counteract the effect of fructose in part, although it's probably a good idea to cut down on highly processed, high fructose foods in the first place, since our bodies are not very good producers of DHA and EPA, things that are in fish oils. Taking in the healthy fatty acids through diet or supplements may also be wise. The best sources of DHA, EPA are cold water fish like tuna and salmon. Tuna is not, it's too dry. And for the vegetarians out there, these forms may also be found in seaweed and algae in small amounts, or concentrated in seaweed and algae supplements. The author recommends consuming 1 gram of DHA every day. The bottom line is that omega-3s may protect our brains, not just now, but in the years to come. Our findings suggest that consuming DHA regularly, fish liver oil, protects the brain against fructose's harmful effects, says Gomez Pinella. It's like saving money in the bank. You want to build a reserve for your brain to tap when it requires extra fuel to fight off future diseases. أسأل الله التوفيق والتيسير. إن شاء الله تعالى في هذا القدر كفاية. This is sufficiently, إن شاء الله تعالى, لمن أدركته العناية, whoever Allah's help reaches. أسأل الله التوفيق والتيسير. Should one eliminate white sugar from their diet or entirely, or is it okay in moderation? Yeah, throw it overboard. How do we cleanse our bodies from environmental pollutants like secondhand smoke and smog and chemical dyes, etc., by any means that you can? There's books about how to get rid of such things out of your lives and where they're identified. And nas'alullah tawfiq wa taysir. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Happily, the smoking is run out of class in most of the Western countries. And if you complain about somebody's second-hand smoke, somebody else will do something about it. Nas'alullah al-afiyah wa tawfiq. Alhamdulillah.